Hello everyone. Have a nice evening. Enjoy a good ghost story with the gentle sound of rain from BLACKRIDGE Stories, and sleep well. If you find these stories interesting, please subscribe and comment for me. Thank you very much everyone. And now, without making you wait any longer, let's go to part 1 of the story, The Ghosts of Larue D. Carter Hospital. Tonight, I invite you to sit back, relax, and let your mind drift through the abandoned corridors of history. This is not just a story. It is a whisper from the past, echoing through the peeling walls of a place long forgotten by time, but never by those who suffered within it. This is the first chapter of our descent into one of America's most unsettling haunted places, Larue D. Carter Memorial Hospital, an old psychiatric facility in Indianapolis, Indiana, that still breathes in silence, hiding shadows too stubborn to leave. Originally opened in 1948, Larue D. Carter Hospital was designed as a modern solution to the overcrowded and cruel asylums of the time. It promised dignity, care, and progress. But the very walls meant to protect the vulnerable became witnesses to torment, confusion, and silence that cut deeper than screams. Many who entered never left the same, if they left at all. Let's begin. It started with a local urban explorer, Caleb, a college student obsessed with filming abandoned buildings. He had heard the rumors, whispers of strange lights, cold spots, and shadow figures roaming the old hospital after sunset. One night, against the warnings of locals, Caleb and his 2 friends decided to explore the crumbling shell of Larue D. Carter. The group entered through a basement window, shattered years ago and left open like an invitation. The air inside was immediately different, thick, musty, and humming with a tension none of them could quite explain. Their flashlight beams danced over graffiti-tagged walls, rusting medical equipment, and old hospital beds that looked as though someone had just stepped away. Then they heard it, a sound that didn't belong, a soft, rhythmic tapping, like fingers on glass. But the windows were sealed, and they were alone, or so they thought. As the night deepened, Caleb's camera began to act strangely. The screen flickered. The audio crackled with bursts of static, until it picked up something unmistakably human. A voice, a whisper, just one word. Stay. They froze. Caleb played the recording again. The whisper was there, clearer now, almost a plea. They pressed deeper into the building, drawn by some invisible force. Every hallway seemed to curve in on itself. The layout made no sense, and time felt slow, like they were sinking underwater. At one point, they passed what looked like the old children's ward. The walls were still painted with faded clowns and cartoon animals, peeling from years of neglect. But the strangest thing was that the hallway was warm, too warm. It was the only place in the building that didn't feel dead. That's when the laughing started. Soft at first, like a child giggling behind a curtain, then louder and closer. The group turned on their heels and ran, but the hospital didn't seem to want to let them go. The hallway they had entered no longer led back to the stairwell. Doors that were open seconds before were now locked. Windows showed only blackness, even though the moon had been out when they arrived. Panic set in. One of Caleb's friends, Jason, began banging on the walls. "This place is wrong," he yelled. "It's like it's changing when we're not looking." And he was right. At this point, we must pause. To understand what's happening here, we need to look back, not just to the building itself, but to its residents. Larue D. Carter was once home to patients suffering from severe schizophrenia, paranoia, and dissociative disorders. Back then, mental illness was treated with methods that seemed brutal by today's standards: insulin shock therapy, electroconvulsive treatments, and experimental drugs. One such patient, Eleanor M. was admitted in 1956. She was 19, institutionalized by her family after claiming to see people in the mirrors and hearing music no one else could hear. Records say she was quiet, compliant, until one night she vanished during a routine check. Her body was never found, but in the years after her disappearance, staff reported hearing humming in the West Wing, Eleanor's favorite lullaby. Others claimed to see her reflection in mirrors where no one stood. Some say she's still waiting, still trapped in a place that never gave her peace. Back to Caleb and his friends. After hours of trying to find an exit, they finally stumbled into the old electroshock therapy room. The equipment had long since been removed, but the outlines on the floor and walls were still visible, shadows of violence. Then the lights went out. Total darkness swallowed them. The camera flickered once more, and Caleb could just barely make out a figure in the corner, tall, motionless, and wrong. He whispered to the others to stay quiet, but Jason panicked, screaming and running into the dark. The last thing they heard was the slamming of a door, and then nothing. Jason was gone. When emergency services finally arrived the next morning, tipped off by Caleb's girlfriend, who had received a voicemail of static and crying, they found Caleb and the third friend huddled in a supply closet, shaking and incoherent. Jason was never found, but on one of the hospital's upper floors, carved into the crumbling drywall, was a single word, fresh, not weathered like the rest of the room. It read, "Stay." The same word from the whisper. The same word that Eleanor M. wrote again and again in her patient journal. To this day, Larue D. Carter Hospital remains off limits to the public, but the brave or foolish who sneak and report the same things. Cold spots where there shouldn't be any. Faint music in the halls. Whispers in the static. And always the feeling that someone is watching. Some believe the hospital is a gateway. Others say it's a trap. A place where the veil between reality and madness is thinner than we care to admit. Whatever the truth may be, one thing is certain. Some ghosts don't want justice. They want company. Let's get to part 2 of the story. The haunted Waverly Hills house. Evansville. Welcome back, dear listener. Tonight, we continue our journey through the shadowed places of America. Those forgotten corners where time seems to stop and the past refuses to rest. If you think you've heard every haunted house story, you haven't heard this one. This is the chilling tale of the Waverly Hills house, tucked away on the outskirts of Evansville, Indiana. A beautiful, aged structure with wide porches and ivy-covered brick. But behind its charm lies something dark, something that moves when no one is looking, and whispers when no one should be speaking. Let's go back to 1906. That's when the house was built by Joseph and Margaret Bellamy, a wealthy couple who had made their fortune in coal and textiles. They wanted a grand home to raise their growing family, far from the pollution of the cities. For a time, it was idyllic. They hosted garden parties, holiday balls, and raised 3 children in the warmth of southern Indiana's sun-dappled summers. But in 1913, something changed. Their youngest daughter, Clara, fell ill. The doctors at the time believed it was tuberculosis. Others whispered it was something stranger. She began talking to someone only she could see, someone she called the man in the mirror. Her health declined rapidly. She was confined to her room 3, on the 2nd floor. She died there, at the age of 7. That was the first tragedy, but not the last. In the decades that followed, the Bellamy family was plagued by mysterious deaths, financial ruin, and disappearances. Their eldest son, Thomas, was found at the bottom of the main staircase, his neck broken. No signs of a struggle, no explanation. Margaret Bellamy herself was committed to an asylum in 1921 after attempting to set the house on fire, screaming that they're coming through the walls. Joseph Bellamy vanished the following year. No body, no note, just an empty study, and the sound of his phonograph playing long after it had run out of records. For decades, the house stood empty. Locals avoided it. Children dared each other to run up to the front porch at night. None ever made it inside, but in 1979, the house was bought by a man named Robert Keyes, a retired military officer who had never heard the stories. He moved in with his wife and their teenage son, hoping for a quiet place to write his memoirs. They didn't even last 6 months. It started small, as it always does. Footsteps on the stairs when no one was there. Doors that refused to stay closed. Lights flickering even when the power had been shut off completely. Robert would often hear someone humming in the hallway late at night, just outside his bedroom. When he opened the door, nothing. His wife, Denise, claimed to see a little girl in a white nightgown standing at the top of the stairs. But when she reached for her, the girl would vanish mid-step. leaving behind only the scent of lavender and blood. Their son, Daniel, was found sleepwalking several times, always heading toward room 3. One night, Robert followed him and heard him talking through the closed door. "Who are you talking to?" Robert asked. Daniel turned, eyes unfocused. "The man in the mirror. He says I live here now." Let's pause for a moment. The Waverly Hills house has never been officially investigated by historical societies, but local police records show over 15 emergency calls from various tenants over the decades, each one describing similar symptoms: paranoia, sleep disturbances, disorientation, and most disturbing of all, shared hallucinations of a tall, black-suited man with no face. Psychologists called it mass suggestion. Paranormal researchers had another word: attachment. Back to Robert Keyes. On the final night the Keyes family lived there, Denise had locked herself in the bathroom after waking up to find a figure crawling across the ceiling above their bed. Robert broke the door down. She was catatonic, her hands clawed raw from trying to scratch out her own eyes. In the hallway, Daniel had drawn hundreds of small handprints on the walls with red crayon, only they weren't drawn at child height. They were at the ceiling. After that night, Robert packed up his family and left everything behind. They never went back, and to this day, none of them speak publicly about what happened inside that house. But the story doesn't end there. In recent years, the house has become a magnet for ghost hunters and thrill seekers. YouTubers, TikTokers, amateur paranormal groups, all hoping to catch something on camera. Many of them do. One video, uploaded in 2022, shows 2 young men exploring the upper floors. Around the 17-minute mark, the cameraman pans past a hallway mirror. For a split second, you see it. A little girl standing behind them, not visible in the room itself. She's pale, eyes wide, mouth open in a scream. You can't hear, only see. When they reviewed the footage later, they also discovered a faint whisper buried deep in the audio track. It says, "Room 3. Another visitor, a local nurse named Eliza, claimed that when she stepped into room 3, her phone battery instantly drained. When she turned to leave, the door had closed behind her. Locked. She was trapped for over an hour, though friends said she was only gone for 5 minutes. When they found her, she was crying and wouldn't stop repeating a phrase. I saw my reflection blink." Today, the Waverly Hills house is still standing, still empty, still watching. Locals say no birds nest near it, and dogs refuse to go beyond the gate. On quiet nights, you can still hear that music box playing from somewhere inside. Clara's lullaby, according to the old family records. Some say the house is cursed. Others believe it has become a sort of collector of pain, a place that thrives on the trauma of those who enter and feeds that pain back to them, warped, magnified, alive. One thing is clear: not every haunted house is evil, but this one, it remembers, and it wants you to remember too. Let's move on to part 3 of the story, The Forgotten Children of Lyles Station School. Welcome back, dear listener. Tonight, we journey to a place where innocence met tragedy, and where the echoes of unfinished childhoods still wander the worn wooden floors. Our story takes us to Lyles Station, a small, rural community in southern Indiana. Quiet, historic, and proud. Founded in the mid-1800s by free black settlers, it once thrived with farms, businesses, and, at its heart, a single-story schoolhouse built of brick and hope. Lyles Station School was more than a place to learn. It was a symbol, a safe haven, a promise that each generation would rise higher than the last. But all of that changed in 1923. Let us go back in time. The school had just reopened after the summer harvest, welcoming a class of 32 children, all from local families. But within weeks, a strange illness began to spread. It started with a cough, a fever, fatigue. Then, things got worse. Children stopped speaking. Some reported seeing people in the corners of the room, people the teachers couldn't see. Mrs. Evelyn Maris, the head teacher, wrote in her journal, "They whisper to someone who isn't there. They cry when no one's touched them. I fear something has entered this place, something that hungers for children's laughter and turns it into screams." By the end of that October, 12 children were dead. and no one knew why. This was more than an epidemic. Some claimed it was polio. Others thought it was a tainted water source. But there were too many strange inconsistencies. No adult in the town fell ill. No doctor could identify the symptoms. And strangest of all, every child who died had sat in the same row of desks near the school's back wall, directly under a long-forgotten attic vent. The school was closed permanently. Parents demanded it be torn down, but Lyles Station didn't have the funds, and so it remained, locked, abandoned, left to decay under the weight of silence. For years, no one went near it. Windows boarded up, doors chained, but even from the road, people said they could hear children giggling and then crying. Sometimes, late at night, you'd see a single flickering light in the main classroom, though no electricity had run to the building in decades. Then came the restoration. In 2004, a group of preservationists, eager to revive the town's history, sought to restore Lyles Station School as a museum and educational site. They approached it with respect and reverence, but something inside did not want to be disturbed. It started with the footsteps, unseen, barefoot, light like a child's, walking the halls during lunch breaks, pattering down the main corridor just after sunset. But when staff investigated, no one was there. A visiting electrician reported hearing laughter in the attic. He went up with a flashlight and never finished the job. He quit that night, refusing to explain why. Let's pause here. EVP recordings taken during the renovation captured strange audio anomalies. Faint whispers, a child saying, "Don't go back." A voice humming what one researcher later identified as a funeral hymn from 1919. More disturbingly, several school desks were found moved overnight, often rearranged into the same pattern. 3 rows of 4, with the back right seat always empty. No one could explain it. And then came the girl. Volunteers remember her vividly. A young girl in a white dress, no older than 8, with braids and old-fashioned shoes. She'd be seen sitting on the front steps of the school at dusk, always alone, always silent. When approached, she would vanish. At first, people thought she was local, a neighbor's child, until one day, a photo was found in the restored archives, class of 1923. There she was. Her name was Emma Lee, one of the first children to die. Visitors report strange sensations inside the schoolhouse to this day. A sudden drop in temperature near the back wall, the smell of chalk dust and roses where no flowers exist, and the feeling of tiny fingers brushing your hand, especially if you stand near the old bookshelf in the northwest corner. A teacher on a guided tour once fainted after hearing a chorus of voices whisper, "It's time for recess," when she was completely alone. One guest, a former student of the modern Lyles Station program, brought a digital recorder. When he played back at home, the audio had captured more than just ambient noise. A clear child's voice whispered, "You sat in my seat." That visitor never returned. He later said in an interview, "It followed me home. I don't think I left the school. I think it came with me." Why do they linger? Some say the souls of the lost children never realized they died, trapped in a loop of lessons, recess bells, and half-finished spelling tests. Others believe the epidemic was never natural, that something darker, an entity older than the school itself, used the children's illness as a cover, feeding off their energy, embedding itself in the bricks and mortar. Whatever the truth may be, those footsteps never stopped. Even now, if you walk by the school after sundown, you might hear them, soft, rhythmic, childlike, the sound of a class long dismissed, but never released. Locals say to never follow the sound, and never, ever answer when someone tugs at your sleeve and whispers, "Can I go home with you?" Because once they follow you, they never go back. Lyles Station School stands today as both a historical site and a haunting reminder of lives interrupted. Its walls echo with lessons left unfinished, names never called for attendance, and laughter warped by time and grief. Not every haunting is malevolent, but some are hungry for remembrance, and some just want to be heard again. So if you visit, be kind, be respectful, and whatever you do, never sit in back row. Let's move on to part 4 of the story. the Maiden of Bethel Church, Tippecanoe. Welcome back, brave soul. Tonight, we travel to a quiet countryside, a place forgotten by time, yet remembered by the whispers that rise with the wind. This is a tale of love, loss, and a presence that still walks under the light of a full moon. Our story unfolds in Tippecanoe County, Indiana, where Bethel Church sits quietly among the trees, surrounded by a small, overgrown cemetery. Built in 1867, the church has long been abandoned. Its wooden frame leans slightly with age. Paint peels from its once white siding, and the bell tower hasn't rung in over a century. The locals say that on nights when the moon is full, a bell does toll once. That's when she appears. Let us begin with the legend. They call her Clarabelle, a name passed down through stories told in hushed tones. Some believe she was the daughter of a traveling preacher. Others say she was a bride-to-be, jilted on her wedding day and left to wander the fields in grief. But one thing is always the same. Clara appears in a white dress, old-fashioned in style, her long dark hair trailing behind her. She is often seen walking between the gravestones, or standing silently at the church door, her face hidden by a veil of moonlight. She does not speak. She only stares. And then, without warning, she vanishes. The first known account dates back to 1892. A farmer named Walter Hayes was returning home late, passing by the church on horseback. He saw what he thought was a woman standing in the road, her dress glowing unnaturally in the moonlight. Startled, he slowed to speak, but as he approached, she disappeared. The horse reared violently. Walter fell and broke his arm. He would later tell friends. There was no breath in the air, but my skin turned to ice. She wasn't just a woman. She was something waiting. Years passed, and sightings grew. In 1921, two boys dared each other to spend the night in the churchyard on Halloween. Just after midnight, they claimed to hear soft humming, like a lullaby. One of them said it came from the church's broken windows. The other swore it came from behind the headstones. They ran when they saw a figure float, not walk, between the graves. But who was Clarabelle? Parish records from the 1870s mention a young woman by that name. She was set to marry a local man named Eli Barker, a stonemason, but the wedding never happened. Clara was found drowned in a nearby creek the morning of her ceremony, still in her dress. Some believed she slipped while fetching water. Others whispered that Eli had left town suddenly the night before, and Clara, heartbroken and humiliated, took her own life. The preacher at the time ruled it an accident, but her grave was never marked. That's when strange things began. The bell in the tower rang once every full moon, though the pull rope had long rotted away. Visitors said they saw a light in the church window, even when no one was there. And on occasion, travelers along the nearby dirt road would find a single white flower left on their car windshield. Always at night, always when the moon was full. Let's pause. In 1983, a paranormal research group spent the night near Bethel Church with permission from county officials. They recorded hours of audio and thermal imaging. At 2:13 a.m., the bell rang once. The temperature dropped suddenly by 15 degrees, and their equipment picked up an unexplained female voice saying, "Why didn't he wait for me?" The team left before dawn. One of the researchers later said, "We came looking for a ghost. What we found was grief frozen in time." Recent sightings are no less chilling. In 2011, a couple driving by on a camping trip stopped after spotting what looked like a bride standing in front of the church, thinking it was a prank or maybe a lost reenactor. They approached, but as they neared, she lifted her head. Her face, they said, was pale and expressionless, except for the eyes. Dark, deep, endless. They turned to run, but the woman was suddenly right behind them, though they never saw her move. The couple fled and never returned to Tippecanoe. What does she want? Some say Clara is searching for Eli, doomed to wander until she finds him. Others believe she protects the cemetery, chasing away those who approach it with ill intent. One story claims that a group of teenagers once tried to steal the old church bell for scrap metal. They left empty-handed, terrified, claiming they were attacked by a screaming figure in white. whose mouth never moved. When they returned to their car, all 4 tires were slashed, and the word "wait" was carved into the hood. The moon draws her out. Something about its light seems to awaken her sorrow, as though the silver glow reminds her of the wedding night she never had. Photographers and thrill-seekers still visit during full moons, hoping to catch a glimpse. Some succeed, capturing a shadow in the windows or an imprint of a woman's silhouette where no person stood. But others leave with more than photos. They report dreams of drowning, of standing in a dark church, hearing footsteps behind them, of waking with muddy footprints by their bed. So if you ever find yourself in Tippecanoe, and the moon is full, and the wind carries a song you don't recognize, don't follow it. Don't look for her. She's already seen you. And if you hear the bell toll once, just once, it means she's near, still waiting, still watching, still wondering why he never came back. The story of Clara Bell reminds us, not all ghosts seek vengeance. Some simply remain, bound by a love that refused to fade, even in death. But that love, left to rot, can become something else. Something that sings to the moonlight and walks among the stones. Let's move on to part 5 of the story. The soldier who never stood down. Corydon's Restless Sentinel. Welcome back, night travelers. Tonight, we move through the shadows of history to a battlefield where blood was spilled, but peace never truly came. Beneath the quiet soil of Corydon, Indiana, a soldier's spirit still marches. He wears the uniform of the past, carries a musket no longer made, and guards a cause long forgotten. This is the tale of the Civil War ghost who refused to leave his post. Let us begin in July of 1863. The Battle of Corydon, though small by the scale of the Civil War, left deep scars on the land. On July 9th, Confederate cavalry under General John Hunt Morgan swept into Indiana, clashing with local militia in Corydon, the only official Civil War battle fought in the state. The battle lasted less than an hour, but for some, it never truly ended. Among the names of the fallen, one remained shrouded in mystery, a young Union soldier whose records were either lost or perhaps erased. No grave bears his name, no family claimed his body, yet his presence endures. Locals call him the Watchman. He has been seen patrolling the old battlefield, dressed in a tattered blue coat, brass buttons dulled with age. He moves with purpose, head high, musket at his side. His boots make no sound, but his shadow is unmistakable against the moonlit grass. Many say he appears just before a storm rolls in, his outline flickering like a mirage in the haze of heat lightning. And then he's gone. The first documented sighting came in the early 1900s, when a farmer plowing the field near the Corydon battlefield stopped to rest. As he drank from his canteen, he noticed a man walking along the tree line in full Union uniform. The farmer called out, thinking it was a reenactor or a lost hiker. The man didn't respond. Instead, he turned his head slowly, revealing a face as pale as smoke, with eyes that didn't reflect light. The farmer dropped his canteen and fled. When he returned with neighbors, no footprints could be found, only the imprint of a musket, but in the dirt. Decades passed, but the soldier never faded. In 1947, a school teacher visiting with her class swore she saw a figure standing by the historic marker. She snapped a photo. The image, when developed, showed a blurry shape. A man in a hat with crossed belts, watching the children from a distance. In the 1970s, a group of Civil War enthusiasts camped near the site for an overnight event. Around 3 a.m., they heard the sound of marching boots. One man recalled, "It was steady like drill steps, but we were all in our tents." When they stepped outside, there was no one there, only the sound of a single musket shot, far off in the woods. But why does he remain? Some say he was left behind, abandoned in the chaos of retreat. Others believe he died protecting a civilian family who refused to flee. A few whisper that he was a deserter, shot by his own side, and cursed to walk the earth in shame. Whatever the truth, one thing is clear. He is still on duty. Let's look at a chilling encounter. In 2006, a pair of amateur ghost hunters came to Corydon during the full moon, hoping to capture paranormal evidence. They brought thermal cameras, EVP recorders, and night vision gear. At 2:47 a.m., they recorded the sound of metal scraping, followed by footsteps moving in a perfect straight line. One of them, reviewing footage later, saw a shape crossing the field, a man with broad shoulders, holding something long in his hands. The EVP captured a whisper. "Hold the line." That same night, the car battery died. The windshield had fog from the inside, and written in the condensation were the words, "I am still here." Modern-day Corydon tries to forget. The battlefield is now a tourist site with walking paths, benches, and historical plaques. But guides are careful not to linger after dark. Some refuse to take evening tours altogether. Why? Because the soldier doesn't like intruders. Several guests report feeling watched. Others say they smell gunpowder, despite no weapons being fired for over a century. One visitor, a veteran himself, said he stood at the site and felt a sharp pain in his chest, only for it to disappear the moment he stepped off the grass. But not all spirits are malevolent. One local historian believes the watchman is not vengeful, but vigilant, a guardian rather than a ghost. She claims that during one tornado warning, a boy went missing near the battlefield. As search parties combed the area, they heard him calling from the trees. When they found him, the boy said, "A man in a blue coat told me to stay still and wait for help." No man was found, no tracks were left, and the boy was safe. What binds a spirit to earth? In the watchman's case, it may be duty without end, a soldier who never received new orders, a protector who believes the battle is not yet over. Some nights you might catch a glimpse, a glint of brass in the tall grass, or the silhouette of a bayonet under starlight. But beware, those who mock the sight, who trespass with cruel intent, often report unexplained scratches, broken camera lenses, or nightmares of war, of cannons firing, blood-soaked earth, and a cold voice saying, "You weren't supposed to be here." So if you visit Corydon and feel a sudden stillness in the air, listen. Do you hear marching? Do you smell gunpowder on the wind? Do you see movement beyond the trees? If you do, stand tall. Place your hand over your heart. And remember, not every ghost is a curse. Some are soldiers, still serving. Let's get to part 6 of the story. The locked room at French Lick Springs Hotel. Welcome back, brave listeners. Tonight, we check into a place where luxury meets legend, and behind opulent walls lie doors best left unopened. In the rolling hills of southern Indiana, nestled among mineral springs and manicured lawns, stands the French Lick Springs Hotel, a grand destination known for its spa treatments, architecture, and its haunted secrets. This is the tale of the locked room, a space sealed for decades, its door refusing to open, as if the room itself had decided to shut the world out permanently. Let us begin in 1901. The French Lick Springs Hotel was booming. Its famed mineral springs drew wealthy guests, gamblers, and celebrities from across the country. But behind the glamour, whispers persisted of a certain room on the 4th floor. A room with no official number. A room with no guests checked in ever. And yet, some claimed they heard footsteps inside. Others said they heard furniture being dragged across the floor, even though the door remained locked from the inside. The hotel tried to explain it away. They told guests it was a maintenance room or a storage closet, but employees knew better. One housekeeper, Marietta O'Neill, worked at the hotel from 1919 to 1943. In her journals, later donated to the Town Historical Society, she wrote, "There's a room that breathes cold air through its cracks, even in July. I once heard a woman crying softly behind the door, but when I unlocked it, it wouldn't budge, as if the lock had no power." Her notes were dismissed until decades later. Fast forward to 1975. A team of renovation contractors arrived to modernize the hotel. When they reached the 4th floor, they found the mysterious locked room, its door frame slightly warped, as if something inside had been pushing outward. They attempted to enter, first with a key, then with tools, finally with a steel battering ram. Nothing worked. The room remained sealed, the door absorbing force like stone. Then, according to the project manager's report, something strange happened. The handle turned on its own. No one touched it, The room remained locked, but everyone left the hallway immediately. The hotel shut down the fourth floor for weeks. They told the press it was due to asbestos, but locals whispered something else. The hotel's haunted wing has awakened again. So what's the story behind the room? Legend says that in the 1920s, a young woman named Eleanor checked in for a spa retreat. She came alone, seeking rest from an abusive husband and a life of high society suffocation. Hotel staff recall she was polite but distant. She wore dark veils and kept to herself. She always requested the same room, top floor, corner unit, west facing, the very location of the now locked door. One morning, she failed to come down for breakfast. A bellhop was sent to check. He knocked. No answer. He knocked again. Then from inside, a scream, followed by silence. Security arrived. The door wouldn't open, and when they finally broke it down, no one was inside. Not Eleanor, not her clothes, not even her luggage. Only a faint smell of lavender and the sound of a door creaking, even though no windows were open. From that day forward, the room refused to stay open. Every time it was unlocked, it would slam shut within hours. Furniture inside would rearrange itself. Paintings fell, doors swelled, mirrors shattered. So the hotel gave up. They sealed it. No number, no name, just a door that doesn't belong. But the story doesn't end there. In 1992, a group of ghost hunters from Bloomington were granted access to the hotel for an overnight investigation. When they reached the fourth floor, one of them, a young woman named Sarah, stood near the locked room. She placed her hand on the doorknob and whispered, "Are you still in there?" The handle turned, just slightly. Startled, she pulled her hand back. Later, she claimed to feel a presence standing right behind her, even though her team was 10 feet away. The camera footage, it cut to static the moment she touched the door. Guests still report strange occurrences. Some say the elevator skips the fourth floor, even when it's selected. Others who stay in rooms nearby hear soft knocking behind the walls at 3:12 a.m., always the same time. One guest, a newlywed on her honeymoon, claims she awoke to find her suitcase unpacked, clothing folded in a neat pile, on the hallway floor, right outside the locked room. What lies behind the door? Some believe Eleanor never left, that she dissolved into the hotel itself, consumed by sorrow and isolation. Others say the room is a thin place, where the veil between our world and another is worn thin and getting thinner. A few guests swear they've seen a woman in a black veil, drifting through the hallway near the room, her feet not touching the ground. She vanishes when spoken to. The hotel embraces the mystery, but no one is allowed inside. Even today, the French Lick Springs Hotel refuses to number the door. No staff enter it. No cleaners are assigned to it. And security cameras? They face away from it. One manager once joked, "We let the room check itself." Except no one's laughing when, once a year, the doorknob turns. And always, it happens on the anniversary of Eleanor's arrival. So if you visit French Lick Springs Hotel and find yourself near the fourth floor, don't linger, don't knock, and if you hear soft weeping, keep walking, because that door may still open, but what's on the other side may not let you back out. Let's move on to part 7 of the story, The Woman in White on Lanier Bridge. Good evening, listeners. Tonight's tale takes us to Lanier Bridge, a forgotten crossing on a quiet country road in southern Indiana. Travelers might see it as nothing more than a worn passage over a slow-moving river, but those who pass it after dark tell a different story. A tale of a woman in white, whose appearance has stopped cars, froze blood, and, according to some, claimed souls. It begins with a legend. For decades, locals have spoken of a figure, a pale woman in an old-fashioned dress, standing on the bridge, arms outstretched, as if asking for help. She appears suddenly, most often at night, especially when fog settles low across the river. Some see her on foot. Others swear she appears in the middle of the road, forcing drivers to swerve or stop completely. And those who stop, they always regret it. Let's go back to 1932. A farmer named Henry Collis was returning home late after delivering produce to a nearby town. As his Model A Ford rattled over Lanier Bridge, he saw her, woman standing alone, wearing a flowing white gown, staring directly at him. He hit the brakes. He rolled down his window. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked. She didn't answer. He stepped out of the car, and she was gone. No footsteps, no splash in the water below, just the sound of rushing wind and the sudden chill that sank deep into his bones. When Henry returned to town and told his story, people laughed, until a second man, a local pastor, reported the exact same encounter 1 week later. Since then, the sightings have continued. Truckers, teenagers, even police officers have described her. A tall, thin woman with long black hair, a gown that seems to shimmer, and eyes that don't blink. In 1987, a pair of college students dared each other to visit Lanier Bridge on Halloween night, armed with flashlights and bravado. They arrived around midnight. They parked. They waited. And then they saw her. She stood on the bridge's edge, facing the river. One of them, Eli Thompson, walked closer, thinking it was a prank. He called out, "Hey, are you okay?" She turned around, and her face was wrong. Eli later described it as melting, or maybe flickering, like a projection glitching on a wall. He ran. When he turned back, she was standing right behind his friend, inches away. By the time they got to the car, it wouldn't start. They sat in the dark, hearing nothing but the slow tap of fingernails across the windshield. But who is she? Locals tie the ghost to the tragic story of Isabel Hartwell, a young bride who supposedly drowned on her wedding night in the late 1800s. Some versions say she was pushed by a jealous lover. Others claim she jumped after discovering her husband's betrayal. Either way, her body was never recovered. Old records from 1874 mention a missing woman, and newspaper clippings reference a distraught bride lost near the Lanier crossing. Whether or not it was Isabel, the apparition first appeared shortly after her disappearance. Not all sightings end peacefully. In 2002, a man named Troy Daniels was driving home from a late shift. He claims he saw the woman and swerved violently, flipping his truck into the ditch beside the bridge. When emergency services arrived, he was in shock, repeating the same words. "She was in the car. She was in the car. I saw her in the rear view." To this day, Troy refuses to speak publicly about the accident. The bridge has developed a reputation. Teens dare each other to cross it at night, to turn off their headlights in the middle and wait. Some report hearing soft weeping or footsteps walking across gravel when no one is there. One girl claimed her phone froze, playing back a distorted voice clip of someone whispering her name, even though it had been on airplane mode. Paranormal investigators have tried to explain it. Thermal cameras detect cold spots precisely where the woman is often seen. Audio recorders pick up strange clicking sounds, similar to high heels or tap shoes. One EVP even captured the words, "Help me." The bridge's structure itself is sound, but many believe it sits at a spiritual crossroads, a place where sorrow and memory have made the boundary between worlds fragile. And what happens if you speak to her? That's where the stories differ. Some say she simply vanishes. Others, those brave or foolish enough to approach her fully, claim she reaches out, her hand icy and solid. One man said he felt her fingers brushes, and for a full month afterward, he had vivid dreams of drowning. Each night, he saw her beneath the water. Each night, she got closer, until he moved towns, changed names, and never drove near a bridge again. But maybe the most chilling account came from a highway camera installed in 2011 to monitor flood levels. One stormy night, motion sensors triggered at 2:47 a.m. The footage showed no cars, no animals, but for 22 seconds, a figure in white stood still in the center of the bridge. When the video was later reviewed, the timestamp had changed. Instead of 2:47 a.m., it read 1874. Today, Lanier Bridge still stands. Old, cracked, covered in moss. Locals avoid it after sundown. And if you do find yourself driving that route at night, and you see someone standing in the middle of the road, dressed in white, don't stop. Don't speak. Don't look in your rearview mirror, because the last thing you want to see is her face. smiling back at you from the back seat. Let's move on to part 8 of the story. Strange Sounds at Indiana Theater, Indianapolis. Welcome back, listeners. Tonight's story takes us into the heart of downtown Indianapolis, into one of the city's most iconic and quietly haunted locations, the Indiana Theater. This grand, historical venue has hosted musicals, plays, and operas for over a century. But long after the final bows and the closing curtains, strange sounds still echo through the auditorium. Footsteps on empty stages, music with no musicians, and whispers that seem to drift from the balconies, even when the seats are all empty. Let's begin with the building itself. The Indiana Theater was completed in 1927, a luxurious Spanish Baroque-style structure built during the height of vaudeville. It held thousands, with chandeliers dripping in gold, velvet drapes drawn tall, and an organ said to be the finest in the Midwest. But behind the glamour was tragedy. In 1931, during a production of Faust, a young stagehand named David Mercer fell to his death from the catwalks above the stage. Some say he was pushed. Others claim he slipped in a rush to fix a malfunctioning light. His death was quieted in the press, but cast members reported odd things immediately after. Lights turning on by themselves, cold spots backstage, and footsteps pacing above them when no one was up there. The first major incident occurred in 1955. An actress named Margot Fields, in the middle of rehearsals for a Tennessee Williams play, began to complain of hearing piano music late at night, soft and mournful, drifting from the pit even though the instrument had been covered for days. She dismissed it as nerves, until she began to see shadows moving across the stage while she rehearsed her monologues. And one evening, just before opening night, she claimed she saw a man in a tuxedo standing in the 5th row, smiling at her. When she approached him, the seat was empty. But what makes this haunting different, dear listeners, is its consistency. Unlike fleeting ghost stories or one-time sightings, the Indiana Theater has had decades of reports. From ushers, cleaning staff, and even modern-day technicians, the stories keep coming. They speak of heavy footsteps walking from one end of the catwalk to the other, with no visible person above. The scent of old cologne lingering in dressing rooms that haven't been used for months. A persistent cold spot in seat C14, even in the middle of July. One of the most chilling accounts came from Paul Renner, a sound technician who worked at theater in the early 2000s. Paul was closing up after a late event. Everyone had gone home. He locked the front doors, turned off the lobby lights, and returned to the sound booth to shut down equipment. As he stepped inside, he heard it. Faint organ music, slow and sad. The organ had been sealed since the 1980s. He stood frozen. Then the sound grew louder, the notes warping like something underwater. When he looked out over the auditorium, he saw something impossible. The stage lights turned on one by one, illuminating the stage and revealing the silhouette of a man seated at the organ, even though it was covered. The moment Paul reached for his phone to record, the light snapped off, all at once, and the music stopped. He never worked another night shift again. And yet, the hauntings aren't always sinister. Some performers say they feel a presence watching from the wings, not malevolent, but almost supportive. One violinist described it as quiet approval, like someone who loved the arts deeply and didn't want to leave. Another performer recounted hearing slow applause from the back of the theater after an especially emotional rehearsal scene. No one else was there. The director called it the ghost standing ovation. Who are these spirits? Some believe the primary ghost is David Mercer, the stagehand who died in 1931. Others think the man in the tuxedo was a former orchestra conductor who passed away of a heart attack in the pit during a matinee in the 1940s. There's even a theory that the theater is home to the spirit of an unfulfilled actress, a woman named Eliza Granger, who is said to have taken her own life after being passed over for a lead role in 1938. Though no records of her death exist publicly, whispers about a ghostly woman in red appearing in the upper balcony have persisted for nearly 80 years. Paranormal investigations have only deepened the mystery. In 2015, a team brought in high-sensitivity microphones and thermal imaging cameras. During one 3 a.m. session, the equipment captured Footsteps across the wooden stage, though no motion sensors were triggered. A clear recording of someone humming an old lullaby in a female voice. And most disturbingly, a moment when the camera's feed cut out for exactly 33 seconds and returned to show a seat slowly rocking in the front row. There was no draft, no people in the room, just that one rocking chair. Today, the Indiana Theater remains active, hosting plays, concerts, and galas. But performers have a rule: never rehearse alone. Stage managers double-check the catwalks before locking up, and security guards carry rosaries or charms in their coat pockets, because whether it's David's restless footsteps, Eliza's mournful humming, or the soft tapping of ghostly applause, something in that theater refuses to be forgotten. So if you ever attend a show there, and during intermission you feel a cool breeze at your neck, or hear music when no one is in the pit, don't worry. It's probably just the spirits reliving their glory days. Or perhaps they're still waiting for their curtain call. Let's move on to part 9 of the story, the restless grave at Crown Hill Cemetery. Welcome back, night wanderers. Tonight, we descend into one of the oldest and most revered resting places in the Midwest, Crown Hill Cemetery in Indianapolis, Indiana, home to over 200,000 graves, including presidents, poets, and soldiers. Crown Hill stretches over 550 acres of beautifully landscaped grounds. It's peaceful during the day, serene even, but once the sun goes down, something else awakens. Strange disturbances, soft whispers in the dark, and a single grave, said to never stay closed. It began decades ago, with the cemetery caretakers. In the early 1940s, several groundskeepers reported finding freshly disturbed soil at the same grave. Plot 441, a modest stone marker near the cemetery's northern woods. The grave belonged to a woman named Martha Eastwood, who died in 1891 of melancholia, what we now call clinical depression. They filled in the grave, assuming animals or weather had caused the collapse. But the next week, it had sunken again, and beside the headstone, caretakers began to hear soft crying, but only after dusk. As the years passed, the legend of Martha's grave grew. Visitors reported cold spots surrounding the plot, even on warm spring afternoons. Some claimed to feel a gentle tug at their clothing as they passed. Others heard murmured voices, not clear enough to understand, but unmistakably human, and always at night. "Don't leave me here. It's so cold. I'm not finished." These whispers would fade as quickly as they came, but for those who heard them, the sound never left their memory. The most chilling report came in 1976 from a college student named Harold Banks, who dared his friends to spend the night in the cemetery. They camped not far from Martha's grave, joking and drinking, trying to spook each other. Around 2 a.m., Harold wandered toward the trees, looking for a place to relieve himself. That's when he saw it. The grave had been disturbed again, but not by animals or weather. The soil was freshly turned, as if something had been trying to claw its way out. Panicked, he ran back to his friends, who laughed off the story, until they heard the same soft whisper just behind them. No one was there. Harold never returned to Crown Hill, and over the decades, more and more people began to avoid the area near Martha's grave. But the legend continued. In the early 1990s, a local historian named Clara Jensen began to research Martha's life. What she found shocked her. Martha Eastwood had been institutionalized in 1889, accused of hysteria after speaking openly about seeing spirits. Her letters, hidden in local archives, described visions of the dead, unseen voices, and dreams of being buried alive. In one note dated just days before her death, she wrote, "I can still feel the soil in my mouth." Then came the photos. Modern ghost hunters, fascinated by the story, began visiting plot 441 at night with infrared cameras and audio equipment. In one image, taken at 3:33 a.m., a misty shape appears standing at the foot of Martha's grave. In another, a blurred silhouette leans over the headstone, even though no one was physically present. But it was the audio that disturbed the most. When played back at a higher volume, you can hear a voice, a woman's voice, whispering, "Still here." And then a soft sigh, But the mystery doesn't end there. In 2011, severe storms uprooted several trees in the northern area of the cemetery. When workers cleared the debris, they found something unsettling. Martha's coffin had been pushed slightly upward, despite being buried for over a century. It wasn't due to erosion. The surrounding graves were untouched, and inside the coffin, workers claimed to see something else, scratches on the wood. From the inside, officials sealed the grave again. But that same week, 3 different visitors reported hearing crying near plot 441. One woman even saw a pale figure kneeling beside the grave, vanishing as she approached. So who or what is Martha Eastwood? Is she a tormented soul unable to rest? A sensitive woman buried in the wrong era? Or is there something darker beneath the soil at Crown Hill? Something that stirs the dead? Some believe Martha was a medium, gifted but misunderstood, driven mad by the voices of the dead. Others say she was cursed, that she practiced a forbidden ritual to try and bring someone back, and instead doomed herself. But all agree on one thing: her grave does not sleep. Today, the cemetery still stands, quiet, respectful, beautiful in the daylight. But even now, caretakers sometimes find the soil at plot 441 a little too loose, the grass growing a little too thin, and every few months, a visitor will approach the front office, pale and shaken, asking the same question: who was the woman in white, crying near the trees? So if you find yourself walking through Crown Hill as the sky turns red with dusk and the wind grows still, listen. You may hear a whisper through the leaves, a breath behind your ear, a soft, sorrowful voice asking, why did they leave me here? And if you do, don't answer. Just walk away. And whatever you do, don't look back. Let's move on to part 10 of the story, The Boy's Spirit in Hoosier Caves. Welcome back to the darker corners of Indiana's haunted history. Tonight, we journey beneath the earth into the twisting, shadowed depths of the Hoosier Caves, a sprawling network of limestone caves carved by time and mystery, known to locals as a place of natural wonder. These caves also harbor a darker secret, the spirit of a missing boy, whose presence has been whispered about for over a century. The story begins in the late 1800s, in a small rural town near the caves. A young boy named Samuel Turner disappeared without a trace. His last known location, the entrance to the caves. Despite extensive searches, Samuel was never found. The townsfolk feared the worst, that the caves had claimed the boy's life. Yet, something strange began to happen in the years after his disappearance. Visitors to the Hoosier Caves reported hearing soft footsteps echoing through the tunnels, footsteps too light to belong to any adult. Others spoke of faint laughter, almost childlike, drifting on the stale cave air. Then there were the whispers, indistinct words that seemed to come from the darkness itself. Help me. Don't be afraid. Find me. One of the most chilling accounts comes from a group of spelunkers in the 1970s. Armed with lanterns and ropes, they ventured deep into the caves, drawn by the tales of a lost child's ghost. Around midnight, they began to hear small footsteps behind them, quick and light. But when they turned, no one was there. One of the group, a young woman named Emily, felt a sudden coldness and saw a faint figure darting between the rock formations. It was a boy, no older than 8, dressed in old-fashioned clothing, his eyes full of sadness. He vanished before she could call out. Another time, a local guide reported a mysterious occurrence near the cave's entrance. While resting by a fire, he saw a small boy sitting on a rock, quietly staring at the flames. When approached, the boy smiled sadly and whispered, "I'm waiting." But when the guide reached out, the boy simply vanished into the night. Some believe Samuel's spirit remains trapped inside the caves, unable to move on because his body was never found. Others think he protects the cave from trespassers, guiding the lost back to safety or warning them away. The caves themselves seem to respond to this presence. Equipment often malfunctions inexplicably. Lanterns flicker and die, radios lose signal, and compasses spin wildly. Visitors sometimes feel an overwhelming sense of being watched, a chill that runs deeper than the cave's natural cold. One particularly eerie tale tells of a boy's voice heard crying for help deep within the cave system. During a rescue mission in the 1980s, a group of cavers became trapped by a sudden flood. As they waited for help, they heard a child's voice calling out, "This way, follow me." Guided by the voice, they found a narrow passage leading to an exit, saving their lives. Despite these stories, many remain skeptical, attributing the noises and apparitions to natural cave acoustics or overactive imaginations. But for those who've experienced the boy spirit firsthand, the Hoosier Caves will never be just a natural wonder. They are a place where the veil between the living and the dead thins, and a child's lost soul lingers still. If you ever find yourself near the Hoosier Caves, listen closely as you step inside. You may just hear the echo of footsteps following yours, or the faintest whisper asking for help. And if you do, remember to be kind, because some spirits are only waiting to be found.